Hey, this is Tiger. Welcome to my stream. AJ, so nice to see you on the chat. And yeah, well, you can hear it without problems. My voice is not the best this evening, but nevertheless, I will try to get through it. I have a bit of a sore throat. So please excuse me for all this croaking that is going on the channel here. So let's see if I can see a picture on my monitor so that I actually know that I am transmitting something. Yeah, looks good. Sorry again for not appearing last Sunday. We actually had a major internet blackout that lasted until Monday evening, until it was reinstalled or up and running again, and so there was no way of running the stream. Spectre, CD Radar, hey, good evening, hello good people. Thank you CD Radar for posting your sneak peek on the Discord. This is very, very interesting. Super Paul, great to have you on the chat. Great to have you guys. Yeah, one more stream in the Blackpool Branches, what is really a great DLC in my opinion, and where you can just spend so much time and investigate about the locations and what happened there in former times and what is happening there in future times maybe. And we are going to that branch that we have not been on yet. Ravens Lofty, great to have you. Perfect. See, it's good that you're here so that you can actually correct me on my pronunciations of the different station names and other things. And what I wanted to talk to about, Lofty, sorry, I had not a very good night, and so my voice suffered a bit and it's a bit croaky, but I hope it will get a bit smoother while I'm talking. Theodoros, hello. Oh, that sounds, yeah. I already apologized for my voice. You have to put up with that, and maybe it gets a bit more mellow during the stream. At least I have some milk here, a glass of milk on my table, and this is going, or hopefully is going to fuel my voice, so that we can actually enjoy our ride from Ormskirk to Blackpool South. Blackpool South being the branch that we have not been on yet. And the topic of today's stream is why we have so many different Pacers in this DLC. So if you look at this list, you find, if the game actually lets you look at it without throwing you out again, what sometimes happens, you find not less than 10 different versions of this class 142 Pacer, with 3 different liveries, as you can see, and with slightly different variations in the years that they have been produced and put in service. 1993 plus, 1885, and somewhere we will find 1989 to 1996. And I checked it out, and this actually agrees with 2 updates that these trains got, and this is what I actually want to look into today and blend it a bit with an outsider's look on the history of British Railway that explains a bit why or where those different liveries come from. And for that, we're doing the service running from Ormskirk to Blackpool South, so that we in the end can enjoy the Blackpool South line. And I'm actually looking forward to it, because I just activated the mastery reward that I have not seen in the game so far. What is the Pleasure Beach station that is just in construction in the year 86, 87 or something like this. So there will be something new for me if we get to it after my long speech in the beginning. So there are some rare services where you can actually go in one service from Ormskirk to Blackpool South. and this is what we are going to do in summer, so that we maybe do not get that much fog, because we want to see a bit. With the latest update, we got the conductor mode, the guard mode, for the Blackpool Branches DLC. Have not played it yet, it's not what I'm super interested in. But maybe we will get to that at some point in time. Raven's Lofty, I hope you have a glass of water or something handy. Yeah, a glass of milk will do. And if need be, AJ will help me, I'm sure. So, this is the service. We will restart it a couple of times to compare our trains. So this is the oldest version that we have. We cannot really see it anymore now that we are in the game. It just gives us a class 142. And I picked the most normal livery, the provincial sector of British Railways that we had in the 80s. We will get to this in the presentation, with this two-tone blue livery, and the oldest version of the Pacer. That means it has the old engine and it has the old transmission. What is the self-changing gear, mechanical, epicyclical or epicyclic transmission. With three switching points. So, anything else I need to do? I will not set up the line marker, because we will restart that service so often. The model, from what it looks like, I think is the same in all 10 different versions that we have. The livery obviously is different, but the sound definitely is different, and the look and feel from driving differs significantly. And I think this is really a great thing to have all three versions or major versions of the class 142 implemented in the game. Let's open the windows that we can hear a lot. Also have the outside camera next to the engine. You can see where you get to the gearbox valves. This is most probably some kind of a cooler. And on this side you would have one of the two engines. We may start. Starting at Ormskirk, going towards Preston. Guard is buzzing us off. Typically getting the throttle lever towards at least notch 5 quite fast. I heard it on some video that a guy complained that the drivers are driving those diesel DMUs digitally. That means from 0 to 7, from 7 to 0. Now we are through the switch and we can accelerate. And listen to the switching. That was the first switching point at about 18 miles per hour. Yes. Second switching point. And then there will be a third switching point. At about 45. And now I think we are in the highest gear, running through the epicyclical gearbox as we accelerate to our maximum speed of 70 on this line. Just let's make sure that there is not a fourth switching point anymore. And I would have to adjust my little sign for it. But I think it has 4 steps, that means 3 switching points. Yeah, there's no switching anymore. We are closing in on maximum speed. Maximum speed on this train is 75, on the line it is 70. And now we would have, and this is something that you should not do on a train that has a hydrokinetic one. On an epicyclical one, I don't know if it actually makes a difference if you switch down from 7 to 0 in one go. Let's look at the next version. Next version, without spoilering too much, same engine. Like Lofty said, this engine is really putting the bus in rail bus. Yeah, it is a bus engine. It is a... We will get to it in the presentation. A lot of the early versions of the Pacers actually had a lot of bus components, bus wiring, bus transmission, bus... I don't know if it's transmission, but at least the wiring and even the chassis was bus type. Not on the 142 anymore, but on the 141. So that was the first one, 1985. Now let's pick the one with a different livery. Now this would be the equivalent with the same livery, 1989 to 1996. So for that we would take this one, the chocolate and cream one, the Skipper. Let's put it to the same settings here and let's pick the same service and get started for the driver. So if you listen, you will hear that we have the same engine, but when accelerating we will see that we do not have 3 switching points anymore, but just 1 switching point, because starting with 1989 those trains got a new transmission. Instead of the self-changing gears, a mechanical epicyclical transmission with planetary drives, we now have a hydrokinetic, or we can actually move the lever without opening the lid. Interesting. So we have our hydrokinetic or hydrodynamic transmission with a fluid coupling and with a torque converter. There are at least 2 videos about how those couplings work. On the channel, so if you're interested in how a hydrodynamic or hydrokinetic transmission works on a train or on a road vehicle, doesn't matter, and you are very much invited to watch those videos. This is chocolate cream livery. The livery that you will not encounter, as far as I've seen, on AI trains, because it actually does not belong into this region. You would have encountered this livery in the western regions like Cornwall, Devon, Dorset, Somerset, Bristol maybe, but not up here in Lancashire. So we can use it, but we will not see it on AI trains. close the doors. Copy the bus signal. Remember the engine sound? It is rather high pitched, a bit thin. Revving up quite fast. Getting out of the 15 limit. And now let's accelerate and see the difference. Last time we had the first switching at 18 and there is no switching. And with our kinetic drive we are now working with the torque converter. That means we're getting more turning force, losing a bit of effectiveness, cannot go that fast with it. And this is why at about 45 miles per hour the electronics switch the transmission to no longer use the torque converter but get the transmission oil into the fluid coupling. And this is what happened just right now. And now we can accelerate through. So here you can see that this train has already gotten the more modern Voith hydrokinetic transmission. I think it's a 211R, like on so many trains. Interesting color combination, chocolate and cream. It's a natural, I should say, chocolate and cream, huh? Okay, and now the most modern version of the train. But we keep the transmission, it's still the same transmission, but now with a new engine. I hope you still got the engine sound in your audio memory. And you will hear that the other engine that we have now is not only stronger, but it is also, it sounds stronger. For that we would take the orange, and this is the only thing where I have not found out whether there is actually a difference between those two versions. It's always the newest version, 93 plus, and the orange livery, but once it says 2 cars empty and the other says 2 cars loaded, what is obviously a bit weird, because whether the train is loaded or empty is decided by what service you pick, right? And we will see, even if we pick the empty version, we will have passengers in our train. Did I pick the correct one? Yes, 802. Inspector says only Starbucks or my cafe branding is missing. And Raven's Lofty says it makes me hungry. The chocolate and cream, we will get to this. I think it is no, I'm quite sure, at least from what I have read, it is a color scheme that the Great Western Railway used for their passenger coaches before 1948. And because people always liked to see the old liveries again, they used it on that. So this is the orange one. The front is always yellow, but then on the side we have orange and brown at the bottom. Actually quite a nice one, only missing the tiger waist stripes, right? And I think with this one we're actually driving it so that I have to set our destination boards. So if the crank is pointing to the front, then it should be aligned properly. But I'm not able to do it now. Lofty is spoilering what the orange version is for. And totally correct. Some people say it is the Greater Manchester Passenger Transport Executive. Some people say it is an early version of the Tigerways livery. The orange-brown is the livery of the Greater Manchester Passenger Transport Executive, usually abbreviated to GMPTE for obvious reasons. Yes, that is true, and we will get to that in the presentation in a second, when we actually got this train running. Well, that was a bit much. I always like to put it to 3 until the train is actually rolling properly, and then to 5. I don't know if those 211 Voith drives work the same way as the newer versions, the Voith 311, so where the switching only occurs if you put your throttle to 6 or higher. Yeah. But what you can already hear is that the engine has a lower sound, sounds more powerful. And also has actually a bit more punch than the older engines. And just to make sure that we got the right train, it is the newer version of the engine, and we still have our switching point at about 45 miles per hour. Here was the switch, and here you can hear this droning sound of the engine rather than the quite high revving of the old Leyland engines. Just noticed that we passed an AWS magnet, but we did not hear any reaction of the train towards it. Or is a different thing that you can ponder upon. Okay, I prepared a little presentation to more or less summarize what we just talked about with those Pacers. Oh, there is a mistake in my presentation that I have to fix right away. So, otherwise it looks stupid. Now it should work. Where is the presentation? Here we go. Inspector says we had those earthy tones, orange and brown, in TEIC coaches, interiors in Germany in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, that is. Those earthy tones are connected with the 70s, like so many other things that you know from the 70s, like peace and love, right? It's always orange and brown and something in between. Well, the Pacer family. Why do we have so many different versions in the game here? And then I find it great that they actually replicated all 3 different versions of the Pacer with the upgrades. And if you look at it, technical modifications actually make 3 different versions, and oh, it's getting a bit confused. Actually, it should have been the other way around. The Pacer was built starting at about 1980, I think 1981. The first prototype was built, and the idea actually was to replace all the first generation DMUs, what is more or less the 101 or following up to the 1-2X classes, and people were actually looking for quite cheap or economical solution to run trains on not so important lines, and so this idea of the rail bus was more or less created and pursued, where you more or less put a bus constructed for the road on wheel sets for trains. And at the same time, though, for the more important lines, the class 150 sprinters were produced and built so that the sprinters came more or less into existence at the same time as the Pacers did, but on the more important lines, whereas the Pacers were more for the secondary lines. And the first prototype is the class 140, where only one train exists as far as I know, and the first class that was built to use them actually for the public was the 41, built by British Leyland, a company what is originally a conglomerate, big conglomerate, building road vehicles, buses, lorries, and at the time even owning the brands like Jaguar and Land Rover, and niceties like this. And they were charged with building those rail vehicles, and they built the first class in 41, and the second one was still built by this manufacturer, but they had significant changes, especially if you look at the chassis. This thing looks, if you look at it from the front, more like a bus. It is more or less square if you look at it, and those vehicles, if you look at them in the game, just prove it for everyone to see. They are much broader, so they are wider here, making use of the whole loading gauge, and this makes up for the possibility of seating 5 people next to each other in the bus, like a 3+2 arrangement, whereas the 41 has 2+2 arrangement because the chassis was not wide enough. And there were a lot of modifications going away from the road vehicle stuff to rail vehicle grade stuff to make it more reliable and everything. And after the 42, just so that we know what there was still around, there was a class 43 and 44 that is not so much different from the 42, but with different manufacturers, with Hunslet, Barclay, Walter Alexander coach builders, I guess more or less Scotland based, and then the 144 already with British Rail Engineering Limited, the BREL, what was more or less the engineering branch of British Railways, but that was at some point in time made a company of its own. So just to have the classes a bit on the screen, and then the liveries that we have in the game. So there's 3 versions here, 3 versions on the liveries, make up for 9 different versions in the game, and we have them all, and even one version we have twice loaded and empty for whatever reason. And if you look at it in the demarcation that we have in the game, the 85-bit until 91, and then the first update 89 to 96, and then 93 plus. So we have already seen when we have listened to our engine and our transmission that we have differences in the transmission, power transmission, and in the prime mover, the diesel engine. On the first version, we had those mechanical transmissions, epicyclic with 4 steps. It is a self-changing gears RRE4 from what you can read up on the sources on the internet. And there is also a video about this type of transmission, not with an automatic gear change, but with the manual gear change as we have it on the 101. There is one video where we drive around with the 101 and discuss this type of transmission with the planetary drives, and really a great mechanical thing. And then they got the Voith. Voith is the manufacturer in the south of Germany, Baden-Württemberg, that builds so many hydrodynamic drives all around the world. And this was the L211R drive that is still around, I think now in the version R.3. If you look at the Voith homepage. Yeah, Lofty, you're right, there is a T missing. It is Voith. Some things can actually be added and fixed quite fast. Yeah. It's Voith, and the TH that does not show up in how you pronounce it, but in the writing you can actually see it. Thank you very much. Yeah, we have discussed this form of transmission, I think, with a video in West Cornwall local, where we drove the Sprinter that has a similar, I think it is exactly the similar drive in its transmission. And you can see here on this diagram, very small, that on the right side you have the torque converter with this yellow static wheel that allows for conversion of the force that comes from the diesel engine into more turning force on the wheels, and on the left side no wheel, no third wheel between the pump wheel and the impeller wheel, and where we can just couple with the fluid coupling and the streaming energy, Föttinger principle and all that stuff. Very interesting technology, very difficult to implement, and most of the things that are used all over the world are built by this company Voith. And at the same time, first version of the Pacer had British-built Leyland prime movers, obviously connected with the manufacturer building the trains. And it is in our DLC here quite interesting that the company Leyland building trucks, and is still a brand for trucks or lorries at the moment currently, that this town Leyland is quite close to the line where we are passing it when we are getting our token or returning our token at Midge Hall. We can more or less walk to that town of Leyland. That is just a couple of yards to the right then. And 2 engines are in the Pacer, so every vehicle actually has its own engine, 200 horsepower per engine. And then with the second update they got stronger engines, like 225 horsepower per engine. Cummings engines. Cummings, originally a company located in the United States with a British subsidiary, and I think this is where they built those Cummings engines. And this makes the Pacer actually more drivable, and it is quicker, up to speed. And this makes for 3 different versions. So if you want to drive the original one, starting service in 1985, then you would use that one. And if you want to use the other ones that you have there, and this is actually quite unique. I can't remember having seen this in a different DLC or locomotive versions, where you have all the different update versions of the train in one DLC. So big kudos to Just Trains to provide us with them. And that, yeah, you can actually hear and see the difference when driving the train. I think that the DLC as it is situated in about 1986 or 87, because the Pleasure Beach station is just in the process of being built, and you can find somewhere a poster announcing this. And the liveries then. This one with a two-tone blue is the Provincial. We'll see what the Provincial is and where this come into existence on the next slide when we look at the very short and simplified history of British Railways. This is what we find also named in the year starting 89 with regional railways. If you think of the 150/2 on the West Cornwall local Sprinter, also has a two-tone blue livery, but with regional railways on the side. So it's the same body, the same. I don't know if you can call it a company because it is a subdivision of British Railways actually. That was at first called Provincial, but obviously nobody really liked to be provincial, so they renamed it into Regional Railways in 1989. This is what Lofty already told us. The orange version is from the Greater Manchester Passenger Transport Executive, GMPTE. What a Passenger Transport Executive is, we will see on the next slide as well. Because it is always like confusing for someone looking at it from the outside. If you think like British Rail in the 60s, 70s, 80s is like a monolithic block, there is nothing else happening except for the London Underground and Overground maybe. And then there are things like those passenger transport executives. We will see how they fit into the picture. And then this is the skipper version. It has its own name for the chocolate and cream that is inspired by the colors that were used on the Great Western Railway coaches before they became part of British Rail. And they were used in the western region, like I said, what is that part from Cornwall to Bristol, Somerset, Devon, Dorset, more or less. So this part of England in the southwestern region. And if you can and want to trust Wikipedia, then those liveries were actually applied to the first 14 units that were built and used, so with the numbers 1 to 14, and those skipper versions 15 to 27. And then about 100, I think exactly 96 of these units were built and used over time, whereas in the other classes, 41, 43, 44, it is always about like only 20 versions of or units of those trains. So it is not really a coincidence that the 142 is the most important one of those. So this accounts for 9 different versions, why we have 10 in our DLC, why we have the Update 2 Square Orange version twice for loaded and empty. I don't know if someone actually finds a difference here, then let me know. I have not found one so far. And yeah, where do those liveries come from? A very brief history of British Railways. Like always, it must be very condensed to fit on one slide, so please don't crucify me for letting something away. CD Radar says that wouldn't pass current standards. It doesn't have a highlighted door. Probably you're right. Yes, those doors in later versions, the doors were also changed. You do not have those 4-part folding doors that we have on the versions in our game, but they were replaced by 2-part doors that were not folding anymore but sliding to the side. Maybe they got a different color than 2. So British Railways, just to know where those passenger transport executives come into place and why we have a western region and how the Great Western Railway come into place. In Great Britain and the United Kingdom, trains started running at about 1825, with a multitude of privately owned railway companies coming into existence and doing their business after more and more time. I think the first one is actually one the DLC, the Tees Valley, at least if I remember correctly, the first railroad for passengers that was used on a commercial basis was from Stockton to Darlington, what is still part of the Tees Valley DLC, but that is a different story, and in these early years I don't want to get too deep into. What is important is the Railway Act 1921 that led in 1923 to a grouping of many of those formerly independent railway companies, and then you had those big four railway companies that always pop up if you look at British locomotives and British stations and everything. That's the Great Western Railway, GWR, the London Midland and Scottish Railway, for some reason typically not written with an R but just LMS, sometimes written LMSR for the railway, or sometimes LM and SR, but normally LMS without the R as the only one. Then the London and North Eastern Railway, LNER, and the Southern Railway, SR, not to be confused with post-privatization railway companies like the Great Western Railway is again using the same name but a different company now, post-privatization, and also the LNER that you can find on I think the Azuma on the East Coast Main Line. For the LMS, you find this shortcut on the steam engines that we have in Trains and World. I think all of them are LMS, London Midland and Scottish steam engines, like the LMS Stanier 8F, LMS Jubilee, and so on. But there are also quite famous LNER steam locomotives, but just not in the game. So, starting with 23, we had more or less, there were still other independent, smaller companies running their trains, but Isuma says CD Radar. Yeah, but those are more or less modern successors using the same names or part of it again, like London Midland is a company, Southern obviously is, London Northeastern is I think now a company again, or was a company, and obviously the Great Western Railway with the liveries that we have on the Great Western Express are the modern version, is not the old one that we had there in 1923. And then after the next war, LNER is a state-run East Coast franchise, yes, alright. So it's a state-run company, alright, cool. But the post-privatization era is something for a different stream, I guess. For us, it is important how it ended up to be in the late 80s, where we are in with our DLC. So this was shortly after World War I. During a war, typically the railway was state-run, more or less, because it was so important for the war, and afterwards you needed something to pick them up, and this is why the grouping happened after World War I, and with the Transport Act 47, shortly after World War II in 1948. Those four and a couple, or quite a list of smaller companies, were put together, nationalized with a nationalization process in the first version of British Railways under the British Transport Commission, what is more or less an agency run by the Department of Transportation. I don't know if that is the correct term in Great Britain. And here at the first time you had the name British Railways, BR. And they were composed of different regions, following more or less the big four. You had the Western region, the London Midland region, the Scottish region, for some time the Eastern region and Northeastern region, later put together in one region, and the Southern region. And using those colors, more or less, this is why I got those colors here. Yeah, so following more or less the demarcation from the big four companies, now put into regions run by a commission that reported to the government, more or less. And the problem always was that the revenue was much smaller than the costs. And so there were a lot of things happening to get it more cost effective so that you don't have to subsidize the railway that much. There were modernization plans where they got rid more or less of the steam engines and got all those diesel locomotives in their stock. And electrification started to happen in the 50s with the Transport Act 62, led to a lot of line closures. Stations were closed with the beaching cuts to make it more cost effective. That is an area where a lot of the existing railway lines were closed down, stations were closed down to make everything more cost effective. But what is more important to understand the livery things is that at this point the commission was more or less succeeded by the British Railway Sport, what is now not a government agency anymore, but a statutory company. So it is a company on its own, state-owned still, but not an agency of the government anymore, but a company. What we know from Deutsche Bahn more or less in many different ways, but it's also a company on its own, but state-owned to a big extent at least. And that was called the British Rail. British Rail in 1965 for the first time using this logo with the double arrow. Before that we had more or less for the region those totem signs for the station with mirroring those different colors for the regions, and like London Midland or also existed different things sometimes with the station name in itself. But in 1965 we started to have this logo here. Then the Transport Act 68 created those passenger transport executives in urbanized areas, so like metropolitan areas where it is always more interesting to organize the commuter traffic in a different way than with the lines that are running large distances in less populated stretches of land. So sometimes, or in those cases, it is sometimes better to organize it in smaller bodies that can manage the traffic in those more urbanized areas and connect them with bus services and subway services maybe. And what was created there was the West Midlands PTE, the Selkirk PTE, what is the Southeastern Lancashire and Northeastern Cheshire PTE, later renamed into Greater Manchester PTE. And here is our orange livery. So this body coming into existence in 68 was a body that can run their own services and have their own liveries. And DDR says, "Dear Germans, vote wisely. Your economy strongly influences ours." Yeah. Inspector says DB is 100% state-owned. Still, there are politicians who want to expropriate it and make it state-owned. Well, yeah, that is the thing, right? You can always discuss whether a 100% state-owned company is really a company and actually providing more competition. Well, it is like a pendulum. You're going from very strictly nationalized state-run services into full privatization and then back again. We will see that, how it happens. And we also have the Merseyside PTE, later Liverpool City Region PTE, the Tyneside PTE, later Tyne and Weir, what is Newcastle area, more or less, and the Greater Glasgow, later as Strathclyde PTE. So those we have. Greater London obviously had always their own soup to cook, but those things came into existence in 68 and were still around in 87. Tyne rhymes with wine. Yes, Tyne, Newcastle upon Tyne. Tyne and Weir, right? It's Weir. It's not like wear and tear, but it's Tyne and wear. Thank you. What also came into existence in 68 was Total Operations Processing System, the TOP systems. We have discussed this in this one video about the UK freight, how all these calculations that we do with our Bremszettel and Bremshundertstelberechnung in Germany and something, wine and tine and wear and tear. Yes. The top system was introduced in 68 and is still running. That is, I don't know if it is the longest running computer program ever come into existence, but it is still impressive that they still use this assembler program come into existence in 68 to calculate the high speed, the maximum speed and brake settings for their trains. Well, TOPS is part of Trust, as loved here, because there is probably no one alive who can understand what this program actually does, right? It's just working since 68. And in 69, what was there? The British Rail Engineering Limited. The Braille was made a company of its own, important because it later built the 144. And many other locomotives that came. Birel, says here, it looks like your Mirel system. 76, we started to have the high-speed trains and the first tilting trains. Yeah, Mirel, says here, and in 82, what was important for us in our liveries was the sectorization and what happened then. And then, instead of those regions that still existed or did not have this power anymore, all the British rail activities were put together into sectors. Like the intercity sector, what would be, well, translates a bit to Fernverkehr, DB Fernverkehr, so the long lines and the important connections between the cities. Picking up a name that was used before for some trains, but this was now a sector then, and you can find this then on a lot of liveries. Like there is one livery for the 47 locomotive in the Blackpool Branches DLC that has this special intercity livery. Then provincial, what we have talked about, what would be the Regio version then, renamed into regional railways because provincial is not so great a company that you work for. In Network Southeast, what was around London, more or less. So those were the three things, main things for passenger service, and this is where our two-tone blue livery comes in. So those liveries that we have on the old diesels, this great blue with the yellow noses were more or less unified at the same time in 65 when they invented this double arrow logo. And Rail Freight was then the company first that they did most of the freight services, and the liveries for rail freight you can find on the chopper locomotive on the class 20 in the game, for example. Later then in 89, I think, was divided into train load freight and rail freight distribution. Two different companies doing different things, and what is nice on the train load freight liveries, like on our class 37, you have those different, more or less coat of arms style thingies telling you what those locomotives are actually supposed to pull. This thing here is metals, and then there was, like, I think, coal and petroleum and construction with different patterns in the liveries, and also the rail freight distribution, I think it was yellow and red diamonds on it. What is the thing that I really like, this more or less heraldic approach to liveries, and if you ever wondered where this silver livery comes from, and why it is different from the livery that the chopper is running in. Yeah, and then just to round it up a bit, Railway Act 83 was then what initiated the privatization process what led to the creation of Railtrack, what was the predecessor of Network Rail, what is now the infrastructure manager for all the tracks and bridges and level crossings, signaling and all that stuff, and issuing the sectional appendixes. What is really important for us as simulator players. First come into existence as Railtrack, obviously also in accordance with European law, because at that time the United Kingdom, Great Britain, was part of the European Union and had to comply with European railway law and had to separate infrastructure managers from the TOCs, the train operating companies. And this is why we have Network Rail still. And now 24, if you look at what is in the making, if you want to read it up, there is actually a Passenger Railway Services Public Ownership Act 2024. It is not yet a fully act in force, but they are actually deliberating about it. It is in the parliamentary process, and with aiming to renationalize a lot of the railway operations in Great Britain, to undo a lot of what happened in the privatization. So you can see how the pendulum is going back and forth with state ownership, with private ownership, and obviously making it very simple and very short, just to have a couple of milestones to see as an outsider who has not lived in Great Britain during all this time since 1825, what is almost 200 years now, to get a feel for why are there different liveries, what are those companies actually, how do they fit together. And Lofty says, well, Network Rail wasn't really a result of the EU directive so much as Railtrack going poorly. Yes, but the creation of Railtrack, I think, was a result of complying with European law, where you had to separate the infrastructure management from the train operating companies. And what happened with Railtrack and how it got succeeded by Network Rail is, well, maybe at some point you can watch a Netflix documentary or true crime story about what happened there. This is actually quite an interesting story, and nobody actually knows what happened there. More or less, Network Rail was picking up the debris that was left after Railtrack failed. But the separation between infrastructure management and train operating companies, I think, I never checked if it was actually a result of European law or whether it was decided to do this before, but it is obviously a part of what the European law requires. So in our liveries, we have the two-tone blue liveries of Provincial at the time, respectively later the regional railways. We have the Greater Manchester Passenger Transport Executive, and those things are actually more or less still in existence. Sometimes they got merged with other bodies or made into a different legal form, but they more or less still exist. And this is where our orange livery comes from. And then the Skipper version with the chocolate and cream is more or less at this time already like a reminiscence to the inheritance from the Western region and the Great Western Railways with the chocolate and cream cars. So I hope this was not too much history and too much law and too much boring. I think it is always quite interesting to look into those things to see why we actually have different liveries, why we have different brandings, why we have different names, and how this stuff fits together in our game. Not only the technical things like the changes in the transmission and in the engine. And now I think we can go back to running the train a bit. We're approaching Burscough Junction. And DD Radar says very philosophically, it's still strange that the current new trains will one day be historic. Yeah, that is true. That is always the curse of all modern and avant-garde things, that at some point in time they will be just old historic. Inspector, 50 years, in 50 years people will look at an ICE3 Neo in a museum. If it survives that long, yes. I always find it interesting that things that you can fight about today, like how much privatization, how much nationalization you want in a specific sector, has been the discussion like 150 years ago already, and people came up with similar ideas. Sometimes it's just sweet, sometimes it's a bit scary that things are repeating itself. Spectre says West Somerset Railway should be electrified so we can run our stuff there then. Yeah, the ICE3. And we can run 45 miles with the ICE3. That is frustrating. But it's some of the platforms are so short that we can only have the driver get off the train. And we can serve 2 stations with 1 stationary train, maybe. Is there any way to tell which version of a Pacer it is from the outside or from the cab? Not that I know of, actually. Yeah, the class 141, 42 can be distinguished quite easily if you look them up. The 41 is like a square if you look at it from the front. And the 143 has a different front too, but the different update versions in the game with the transmission and the engine, I don't think. You can hear the engine quite easily, but with the transmission you have to more or less drive a bit to see when it switches. Another thing that I wanted to talk about, because we just stopped at Burscough Junction, and I read this up and read around a bit. Because this is already the sectional appendix, but what I wanted to check first is the map here. Well, we're just approaching, this is Burscough Junction, and this is actually the Burscough Junction. And there is a railway line running from, what was it, on the left, Southport, I think, at the coast, to Wigan. I think it is pronounced Wigan. Halfway from Preston to Manchester, more or less. And those lines were connected in former times. Here you can see one of the connecting curves, and they had a connecting curve here up front, but they are no longer. And at this time our line between Ormskirk and Preston was actually part of the line connecting Liverpool and Preston, so the line was not separated here at Ormskirk, with the trains from Preston stopping here and the trains coming from Liverpool area stopping on the other end of the buffer block in Ormskirk. But it was a through line with trains going from Liverpool to Preston, and it was a line with 2 tracks, so it was a double line, just like the line connecting Southport and Wigan. CD Ray says, wow, I never realized how hallucinogenic that background is. Well, especially if you move it around, no, it actually stays the same. And it's interesting to read that this was actually quite a dangerous connection here. And there was in 1880, I think, a major accident with 2 trains crashing into each other, a couple of fatalities. And this connection was severed in the 60s or 70s, I think, so that at the time that we are living now in 1987, there are only just like small artifacts of this connection here still, and this is why it's called a junction, even if there is no junction anymore, what is also an interesting thing. And this accident again, the problem was with trains running from Southport towards Ormskirk and maybe on to Liverpool. We're obviously traveling here on the upper line, for them the left line. And if they want to cross over towards Ormskirk, then they have to cross the line coming from the opposite direction, go through the curve, and then cross again. Here there were 2 lines again. The left track coming from Ormskirk towards Preston, so that they can go on the left track for them again. So they had to cross 2 lines with the setup, and this obviously proved fatal because one train coming from Southport and going the curve towards Ormskirk crashed here with a train going from Ormskirk towards Preston when trying to cross this line. And obviously the signaling and the switch arrangement was not safe enough to prevent collisions like this, and they had some improvements later on, and there was not a difficult accident like this anymore, but still they severed this connection in the 70s. Lofty says, I posted something you might find interesting in your Discord server, and CD Radar says, so kids, and that's why we have signaling. Yes, why we have signaling that actually excludes that there are conflicting movements possible. So let's just check what Ravens Lofty posted on my Discord server. This is the white paper on the privatization of British Railways in 1992. Oh yeah, great. I will look at the white paper, and but not now in the stream, because then everyone just leaves the stream and goes to sleep if I start reading legal documents or pre-legal documents on the stream. Instead, we drive some trains. Tiger audiobook incoming. Yes. Maybe I should make an audiobook reading the most influential EU directives on railway administrative law. Not with this voice, that is true. But if I read through all those directives, my voice will be done anyway. Whoop. Whoop. You get 2 for the price of 1 because it is such a short train. Approaching Rufford. You remember Rufford is the area where the one train operating no staff section ends and the electric token section starts. Ravens Lofty here. once the horn. So, and why with the Voith hydrokinetic coupling, why should you not switch down from 7 to 0 in one go? That is because for this thing, for this transmission to work, you have oil, you have transmission oil in your fluid coupling or in your torque converter. And if you switch your throttle to 0, then the transmission will drain all the oil out of the transmission and then it will run empty. And if you have your engine run on full speed and all of a sudden the transmission runs in empty, then this can damage the engine or the transmission. And this is why you should switch down to 1. Give the diesel engine the chance to rev down and drain the transmission afterwards. So just switch it to 1 and wait a bit and then to 0. At least this is what I have heard about the Voith R311 and 322 couplings that are used on the 628 vehicles. It's not a bad horn, yeah, I agree, it's not a bad horn at all. Yes, Rufford. Standard travel. Second class was changed to a standard then. Alright. This level crossing here is, from what I have read, no, I don't know if it is this one. I think it is controlled directly from this signal box over there, so that there can be no conflicting movements. Careful when starting here at Rufford, because we're still in the 15 limit until we are out of the passing loops. And for this Burscough Junction, I've read that there are actually initiatives trying to reconnect those two lines, make the junction work again. But at this point in time, I don't think that there are more concrete plans to do this. I did not show you the part in the sectional appendix what I actually meant to do in this context, because maybe I should see it myself too. Here we are. You can see Preston. You can see the line to Ormskirk. You cannot read Ormskirk, but this is where the line is severed. Here the 7007 ends and the 8005 comes from Liverpool. And here you can see how the Southport-Wigan line crosses here. And if you want to travel from Southport to Ormskirk, then you just have to go around the loop somehow. So if anyone actually wants to do that, I don't know how many people want to travel from Southport to Ormskirk or from Wigan to Ormskirk. Typically would probably want to have the ability to switch directions here. The EU will pay for it. Oh, actually, it says CD radar. Well, I don't know. But this is what I wanted to show you here in the sectional appendix. Why not having the possibility to switch directions here is actually a thing that makes you ponder if you want to have a network. Expect that it's probably some guy who lives in Ormskirk and works in Southport made that initiative, so vice versa. And CD radar says just buy a car. That is obviously the solution for all problems arising from train traffic. Just use a car. Croston will be the next stop. Have I mentioned how I like the scenery that comes with this DLC? I really do. What I also do not know is why vehicles from this era, most Pacers, most Sprinters, have this BSI coupling here. An automatic coupling, but it's not a Scharfenberg. It is called Bergische Stahlindustrie, so it's actually a name that points to Germany. And why this type of coupling is used here, I have not been able to find out yet. And CD radar says this is basically a British Niddertalbahn. Yeah, why not? Theodoros is laid-back rural scenery, a break from mainline rush. It is an interesting area here, with a lot to talk about and think about what is happening here. And Superpole says, or go by bus. Well, that is the next thing, right? Many of those railway lines here must be supplemented by bus lines, cross-country bus lines. To make it work. With all this talking, I'm a bit behind my timetable. Oh well. Like you said, laid-back rural train driving. A break from mainline rush. Croston. And if I look at the stations too much, then I miss my departure time. Oops. Was too far. Nidder Valley routes is Spectre, yeah. Theodoros, will you buy the Dami line on day one? Maybe. I'm at least looking really forward to Tadami, also to the Dutch line, because it opens up the possibility to do some more new signaling streams. And I'm always so interested in more and different signaling systems. train protection systems. I hope that they will implement the RTP system in the Netherlands and whatever ATC, automatic train control system, they use on the Tadami line. So, next stop is already returning our token that we got in Rufford at Midge Hall token exchange. If it is up to the quality standard I know from other Japanese products, it will be rather un-DGG-like. So you say that other Japanese products have a very high quality standard. Well, just hope. I forgot the name of this third-party developer who is working on the Tadami line, but typically the first products from a new third-party developer are usually really good. Union Workshop or something suspect there, I see. Yeah. Also, those fields look much better than they used to. Oops, there was the caution signal. So, I did not do what I was preaching. I did not rest on notch 1, but you should consider doing this. Inspector says, yes, I'm impressed by lots of Japanese stuff, cars, watches, etc. Didoro says Japanese measure the train stop in centimeters. Let's see what happens when we put European driver in the cab. So, can anyone see the signal? This signal is hard to see because the blade is actually on the same height than the roof of the signaling box. And the conductor apologizes if a train is delayed by 30, wait for it, seconds. They also hand out confirmation delays for passengers and employees. Now it's switched to green. Got to close my Discord again. There's always this Discord message sound. So, got to return our token. We might actually be still in an era where we don't have to stop to exchange the token. I think around that time it got to be part of the rules that we have to stop for a token exchange. Alright, here's your token. Thank you very much. Don't need to look so grumpy. Oops. And now go to Preston. And here somewhere to the right is Leyland with the original headquarters of the Leyland Motors Company. I am not sure whether they actually built our motors, our engines there, not the ones that we have on this train, because we are running the newest version with the Cummings prime movers. So, we have to prepare to slow down to 60 if I'm not completely off. Theodora says, well, any landing you can walk away from is a good landing. On train, I guess it's about stopping. Yeah. Every stop that allows your passengers to leave the train without being overrun or falling into a hole is a good stop. So, is there some marker for the 60? I don't want to cheat, but I think there is already the 30 coming up, or the 20 even. No, this is the 60. I was too harsh on the brakes. This was the 60. I think at the next signal there will be this 20 or so. We're behind it, maybe not before the bridge. No, it's at the bridge, the 20, I think. Yes, I can see it. There it is. And now we're crossing the line to Blackburn. That is the one here to the right, that it goes in a circle, crosses the West Coast main line. And Lofty says, wasn't there that one time they apologized for train leaving 3 seconds early? Can't hurt to apologize. Am I on 30 directory? I am. 30, and then we can accelerate to 75 for a short bit until we stop at Preston. They are really disciplined, says Spectre, but the public also ties in. They stand in line to board the train, unlike a German regional express. Yes, boarding a German regional express is sometimes like fighting in an arena. Preston station limit is 35. But I think we can take our time until we get to the second but next signal. You get a double yellow here. The limit starts at the signal, I think. Here, yeah. 35. Oh my god, what is happening on my Discord? Don't operate your Discord while driving a train, so I will just wait for us to come to a standstill. Here, mark the fact that the AWS magnet does not make any sound when approaching a red light. This might actually be correct. Frame rate is dropping severely here. So we have to stop a bit longer here, as it seems. That makes it possible to look for this announcement about the Pleasure Beach station. This station here has a tendency of kicking the external camera out. Here. Plump. Kicked out, but it was not the announcement that I thought I want to show you. Actually, I'm not quite sure where it is. At least I found somewhere an announcement that there will be a line closure due to the construction of the Blackpool Pleasure Beach station in 87. Well, it is somewhere else, as it seems. So let's get out of Preston and the FPS dump. Turn off this Discord. And leaving on track 2, we can just run through with 35. We're not going across any switch. St. Walburg once more. Preston shunting line on the left, coming in here. And 75. So interesting how the FPS develops. I might have mentioned that I had to update my graphics drivers, so maybe there is some recalculation of shaders or whatever going on. Interesting fact also, after updating my graphics drivers and starting the game for the first time with DX12 option on, it takes almost half an hour for the game to start. So there must be some heavy calculating going on. But it starts then. In the beginning I always thought it crashed the game, but it just takes so long to start. Theodore says, meanwhile I play this game with fake frames. What is that? Fake frames? So we have to stop in Kirkham and Wesham. We can run through Salwick. Can see the chimneys and the nuclear fuel facility in Salwick. I see a lot of things that I don't have a clue about. DLSS frame gen upscaling stuff. So can we just have the train coast until we get to Kirkham and Wesham? We have to go slow down to 45 at the switches. Spectre says this Pacer sounds like it is going to lift off anytime soon. Yeah, exactly. This is the highest speed that it can go. Just gotta pay attention, because this is where I got my spat last time. But this signal is green, that means we can just run through. Pause on notch 1, deal dawdle, and go on. Bridges. Junction signal incoming. Junction signal is yellow, but it's going straight ahead because we have to stop at Kirkham Wesham platform 1, so that works. And we got still some track until we get to the switches. Close-up of the door in action. Will do. Here's the 30 for the switch, and here's the 45 for the straight ahead. And I will take a close-up of the door in action. So we made up some time, actually. So the timetable for the Ormskirk branch is actually much harder than the timetable for the rest, for the line 2. Kirkham Wesham and further on to Blackpool South. Almost back on the timetable. That was a bit harsh, I acknowledge that. Ah, I forgot your doors, sorry. So close doors in action and opening them. Flip and open. And close. A close-up of closing doors. Junction signal is feathering to position 1 and is yellow. Diverging speed is 30, I guess. Most switches here are 30 at any rate. To the left there are the sidings. Straight ahead there's this interesting tip line. There is one freight service with unfitted freight cars and a brake van at the end. And you have to turn around that whole contraption, and it shows how complicated it is to turn around a train with a brake van, because you have to go back with your locomotive, get the brake van, get the brake van to the other end, go to the other end of your brake van with the locomotive, reattach it on the other end, and get the locomotive back on the end where the brake van was. It's a bit like arranging the caboose in Clinchfield Railroad. Well, it's exactly the same because the caboose is a brake van, more or less. But it's super complicated. The English Clinchfield, limited power, anyone? Ah, this is so great, the limited power scenario. I would love to have more scenarios where you have to figure out yourself how to do those shunting movements. But if you look at it on this explains why this turnaround tip line has this weird layout of one part with 2 tracks, then part with 1 track, and then a short part with 2 tracks again, because this is where you stop your train, locomotive at front, cars, brake van at the end. Then you can detach the locomotive, run it around on the other side, get the brake van up, so then the brake van is in front of your locomotive. So you put the brake van on one of those tracks, go back with the locomotive, run around, get the locomotive on this end of the brake van, run the brake van back to the train, then the brake van is on this end, and then you can run around the locomotive, and then the train is turned around. Totally cumbersome, but interesting. Well, the caboose is not really a brake van because the cars between the F7 and the caboose, they have brakes, they have air brakes, they are not unfitted. A real brake van you use if you have brakes that cars that don't have brakes of their own. And Theodoro says Derail Valley player, that's just normal Tuesday. Okay. You do all that shunting in Derail Valley? Never played it. I think there is a 55 limit coming in before we get to Moss Side. In this corner, or at least at the next bridge. I mean, the caboose also exists to inspect hot axles, right? Also, yeah. And also to monitor what is happening on the brake pipe, but with a caboose, the caboose is part of the through-going brake pipe, not like the brake van that has brakes of its own and a lot of cars in between. But for shunting purposes it is more or less the same experience to get the caboose on the other end. I think Moss Side has a 35 limit at the station. It's 35 beginning. From what I've read, Moss Side here is one of the stations with the lowest passenger activity. Again, that is a bit harsh, but well, Theodore's no, I watch Heis. Some stunt he pulled off while shunting was just amazing. I see. Heis. So, Moss side is a bit in the middle of nowhere, but still a full-blown station, and the trains are stopping here. Ah yeah, guard. Thank you. .35 should end. Maybe we can get rid of the wiper now. 70. Was it that one with the speed sign that has fallen down? Yeah, see. Bloop. It's on the floor, but it's still valid. And Skoda is testing battery train on local lines. Yes, I think this has been... I've heard that somewhere that a couple of companies are actually testing battery trains that can be connected from the power supply for a certain distance. Lytham. So at the moment we are more or less crossing the lesser inhabited area between Kirkham and Wesham, and the seafront. So we don't see that really here, but here hogging those branch lines is more or less the seafront. So coming down here, and here is the estuary of the River Ribble, if I remember correctly. So this is a bit of a cut, so that the shoreline is going out again to go around this part where Ormskirk is. But this line here, from this point where we are going now, Lytham, what is it, Ansdell and Fairhaven, and then St. Anne's at the sea, what is one communality as far as I know, is seafront area, right? Quite affluent, rich area. Some people say maybe the richest spot in northern England. And then we're going to Blackpool. What is here? You can see Blackpool North, Blackpool South. And a funny idea is actually that there used to be a Blackpool Central station up until, like, I think in 1964 or something, with a line running straight in from Kirkham and Wesham. So you had 3 stations and 3 lines getting people to those 3 stations that are not all interconnected. I think from Blackpool South you could go to Blackpool Central, though. Now this line has been removed, the direct line, and the whole Blackpool Central has been removed. There's no parking lot or something, and at some places where this old line ran, there is no motorway. So they took your advice, CD radar, and got rid of the train and are taking a car. Before we get to Lytham, I think there is a 50 limit that ends before we get to the station, but nevertheless we have to be expect this as one of the richest areas, and they travel by Pacer. Yeah. Another fun fact while we're talking about this whole line here, since it is a single line, and I think it was a single line since 86 or something, St. Anne's, where we get to, was a station where at first from Blackpool South to St. Anne's it was reduced from 2 lines to 1 line, and then the rest was reduced from 2 tracks to 1 track line. And this whole line can only be used by 1 train, because there is no passing loop. So you could send in a train, and the next train could only go to the second but last station, and then has to leave again. So it is a first in, last out line with no passing loops. There have also been initiatives to install a passing loop somewhere so that you can have a second train. And still, this is not a one train working, no staff area, but it has track circuit block. What seems to be a bit overdone if you think that there can only be one train and still you have track circuit block signals. Well, might work for level crossings and stuff, but I think this is also testament to the fact that it has been a two-track line, and has been reduced, and obviously the track circuits have survived. And CD Radar says it's a bit of a paradox that wealthy areas and neighborhoods have poor public transportation because the rich don't care about it. Yeah. Well, if you commute with your chopper, and I'm not talking about the Class 20, then it doesn't really matter if there is a Pacer or an ICE 4 on the line. So, getting closer to Lytham. Don't know exactly where the 50 limit starts. I think it is a corner bridge scenario again. No, it is a limit before the corner scenario, so I'm a bit late on my brakes. And here it ends again. So for the next ride, limit already starts before this corner. Are you or are you not referring to the motorcycle either, right? Yeah, a chopper can be so many things. And CD Radar says, oh look, we have a beautiful view of the station, it's perfect. Meanwhile, the first night, stupid trains, you can't sleep here. Yeah, that's the thing. So at least that was not so harsh, this stop. I don't want to go in emergency. Yeah, but you can tell a bit. Manners, nice housings, wide streets with houses at the side. Well, this is not so nice manor style housing, but anyway. Ansdell and Fairhaven. One is left, one is right. I guess Fairhaven is to the left because this is where the sea is. And Ansdell is to the right because this is where the Dell is. Cemetery. Nice. if you look at how long those platforms are, then you might actually get the idea that they have not been constructed for a pacer, right? And then the golf courts start. St. Anne's on the Sea. I love how this station is depicted in the DLC here. From what you can read, the station building actually has been, yeah, more or less taken down completely and replaced with a much smaller building. And the northern platform, so the platform to the right when we come in, has been removed completely. So many dashes in St. Anne's on the Sea, yeah. I think St. Anne's is just enough. Lytham St. Anne's, I think, is the proper name for this municipality here. Such a ridiculous thing. Well, they allow you to travel 70 on this little line here. So, and this is beautiful St. Anne's station. Flood. Ah. Not locked, unlocked. What are you doing, guard? Yeah, and look at how they are taking down the station. If you like feeding birds, buy a budgie. But look, you can even look inside defunct building with all this stuff. That's really nice scenery work here. Exit. Yeah. And also on the opposite side. Out of order, yeah, in case you would not have noticed. Blackpool wise. Stink. Well, whoever made this is great scenery work. Yeah, sorry, we're a bit late, but I had to admire the scenery. Operational reasons, yes. So, next one is Squires Gate. What is just before we get to Blackpool. And what is the closest station to Blackpool Airport? Or airfield? Before we get there, signalling box in St. Anne's. Another thing. Another jam, actually. They also have a defunct signalling box. You can see how the levers are on the floor, and yeah, you don't need a signaling box on a single line with no switches anymore, right? But you can see how this was, or used to be, a 2-track line with a crossover here at least, and a signaling box for handling this crossover. Wasn't a really complicated signaling box, but now you don't need it anymore at all. In Japan you would already be without bonuses. Yeah, you're right, CD Raider. Good thing I am not in Japan. Or if I was, I wouldn't talk so much, but just do my job. I would point and call and do my job. So, golf courses to the right. The dunes, sandy dunes on the left. Behind them, the sea. And then to the right, this is the area with the airport. Is there even a plane on it? Take it with the auto mode, otherwise I will... Yeah, there is even a plane. One plane you can see on the airport. You can't go that far in. Yeah, and might start braking for Squires Gate. I can zoom with depth. Maybe I should try. Golf course and airport, dangerous combination if someone is a really strong hitter. Yeah. You have this combination quite a lot. Golf courses in the vicinity of an airport or an airfield. Squire gates. Not Squire gates, Squires Gate. So, and the next one is already our final stop and Blackpool South. Yeah, I told AJ that it will be a rather short stream because I don't have a lot prepared, but as it turns out we are already 2 hours and more. And now we will be passing the area with the mastery reward, the construction site for the Blackpool Pleasure Beach station. Can already see the Pleasure Beach installations coming up. And here is our mastery award. I'll just look at it with the photo mode. So I don't have to stop. So here they are constructing. They are building the station. The overpass is already there. This is also a really nice mastery reward. There are definitely sometimes mastery rewards that are a bit questionable. I know that AJ loves the cheese. The big cheese. But this is definitely within the top 3, I think. The signaling box in Rufford North is nice. Elephants in Dresden are nice. And there are other nice mastery rewards, but that is a really beautiful one. Strikers has tried the 4-bug mastery after the red light bug has been resolved, but the scenario crashed 3 times in a row. Oh no, I did not try this again. So the red light bug is supposedly removed. Here was our constant warning board when running into the end of the line, and now more photo mode because let's have a look at the Pleasure Beach, because they really took it upon themselves to build a lot of those rides and installations. And the Big Dipper, Space Invader was actually cool because this thing is not anymore there. It was in the 80s and it was some point replaced with a Space Invader 2. From what you can read up on Wikipedia. In 2000 it was closed because a boy died on the ride after unbuckling in the panic, and now it is removed to a different theme park in Somerset, I think, with a different name. So you actually have to research what rides there were in 1987 and then build them. They really went to great lengths in the scenery department here. The Pace Invader. That's a good one. Der Praterstern, yes. Von da aus kommen wir dann mit der Droschken heimfahren vom Praterstern. Oh, some weird artifacts. This is our station. Oh, what I did not show is that this public announcement thingy actually works. If you are running between station, you can make an announcement about the next station. Check this out. It's a bit soft, but because this is probably because it is supposed to be heard in the passenger compartment. I wonder if you play the guard mode, if those announcements are played then automatically. Yeah, this is where the line ends. Line close and notice here. From the 6th of March to 87 till the 9th of March 87, a line between Kirkham and Wesham and Blackpool South, so the line that we just went on, will be closed due to the construction of Pleasure Beach railway station. That was what we just looked at. Trains will not run between Blackpool South and Kirkham and Wesham with replacement bus services for Moss Side, Lytham, Ansdell and Fairhaven, St. Anne's and Squires Gate, departing from outside, so they didn't want that many dashes here either. So that means that our scenario here is set before the 6th of March 87, probably. Otherwise the line should already be closed. And in former times, this line as a 2-track line went on, cannot go anymore, but more or less on until they got to Blackpool Central and merged with a line coming directly from Kirkham and Wesham. But not anymore, not in 87, and I don't think that there are even initiatives to reconstruct Blackpool Central Station. That would be a bit overdone. Let's close the doors. I hope you enjoyed my rambling about the history of British Railways and why we have so many different Pacer versions in the game. Again, 9 of them I can explain. Why we have the 10th one is still a bit of a mystery. But still, kudos to Just Trains. This is great to have those different versions. If you have a train that has been updated over time, and to actually provide us with all 3 different upgraded versions. That is what makes a DLC great, in my opinion. Yeah, 10 of them, and here for the 47 they had this. Here you can see the intercity livery from what we talked about, the sectorization. Guys, thank you so much for bearing with me. I hope it was not too boring and too croaky today. I will tend to my voice and hope I will be back with my full voice in 1 week's time. Thank you for the stream, Tiger. See you next time, Suspector. Thank you so much, guys. Take care. Be nice to each other. Thank you for the streams at Super Paul. Nice that you've been with us all the time. And see you around.